All right. So, what does it mean to say that a given statement is true or that a given statement is false? Among some philosophers, this is a really difficult question to answer, and there's lots of contentious debate that occurs about how to properly answer this question, and we're going to skirt right around all of that debate, and we're simply going to assume the correspondence theory of truth as we continue this conversation about true statements, false statements, and soundness. Okay, so what is the correspondence theory of truth? The correspondence theory of truth says this: that if we look at a given statement and we believe that that statement accurately reflects or represents or corresponds to some feature of reality that it's related to, we say that statement is true. And if a given statement doesn't correspond to the way that things are when the statement is uttered, then we say that that statement is false, okay? And we're going to assume this theory of truth, the correspondence theory of truth, because I'm guessing it's the one that most of you rely on in your daily life as you go about your business listening to claims that people make. They say something to you and you say, that's not true. And what you're really thinking is, what this person just said doesn't align with the way that things actually are. Or if you hear what somebody says and you say, yes, that's true, you're saying, okay, what you said aligns with the way that things are. So we look at a statement like this: it's illegal to yell fire in a crowded theater. Is that statement true or false? Do you say true? It's actually false. You can even look up the case law. It's right there. A lot of people think this statement is a true statement. They think that this statement accurately reflects the way that reality currently is. I even heard a few months ago a Supreme Court justice make this claim. It's like, oh man, this is really settled case law. And it's Brandenburg versus Ohio back from 1969. Okay, now what about a statement like this? Hate speech is legal. True or false? Do you say false? It's true. There are no laws prohibiting hate speech. There's laws prohibiting libel. There's law in prohibiting death threats, incitement to violence, and so forth. But so far, right now, as I'm doing this here with you right now, there are no laws against quote-unquote hate speech. And part of the problem, or not part of the problem, part of the difficulty is defining what hate speech is, right? What's the difference between hate speech and speech I hate? Now, what about a statement like this one? Okay, hate speech is legal is a true statement. Is hate speech is immoral? Well, now we're starting to get into some trickier territory, right? Because it doesn't really seem like we can just point to law that's been passed as a way of verifying whether this statement is true or false. Because now we're in this squishier area of morality. Is this a statement that could be true for some people and not others? Well, it sort of depends. Are we going to define our terms really carefully so that we understand exactly what kind of speech we're talking about when we use this term hate speech? And are we going to very carefully define the boundaries that separate immoral actions from moral actions? Because if we do that, and we can agree on our definitions, this statement is either true or false depending on those definitions that we agree to. So here again, we have a statement that's either true or false. It's just going to take a lot of legwork to prove it one way or the other. Now, one distinction we want to make as we continue this journey in this thought primer is the difference between statements that are true and true for me, or true for the individual, okay? So all of these statements up here, they're either true for both of us or they are not. And we may disagree about whether or not we're judging these statements correctly, but if we're carefully defining our terms and carefully gathering our evidence, we can prove that these statements are true and not just true for you or not just true for me. We might have a little bit of fuzziness here on this hate speech is immoral because we'll have disagreements about what exactly morality is. But as long as we agree that morality is something that can be defined, we can determine whether or not this statement is true or false. But the same can't be said down here because statements like this, Phil 12 class meetings are tedious. These are statements that are reporting some individual experience of something. When I say Phil 12 class meetings are tedious, what I'm really saying is I find Phil 12 class meetings tedious. Maybe you don't, in which case that statement would be false for you and true for me or vice versa, okay? So true is not the same thing as true for me. I can say something like vanilla ice cream tastes good and vanilla ice cream does not taste good. And we can both be right. We can both be saying things that are true because we're reporting our individual idiosyncratic experience of the flavor of vanilla ice cream. All right. Now take a statement like this: God exists. Is that a statement that could be true for you and false for me? Or is that a statement that's either true or false? And if you're saying to yourself, well, look, you'd have to really carefully define for me what God is and what exactly are the criteria for constituting what kinds of things exist. What does it mean to say that something exists? Well, yeah. If we do that, then we can determine that this statement is either true or false. This statement can't be true for you and false for me, or vice versa, because if we're saying by this statement that some kind of yet undefined being exists, me believing it exists or not exists doesn't make it exist or make it go away if it does exist, okay? So we want to make sure we're drawing careful distinctions between statements that are true and statements that express our beliefs. There's a big difference between the statement God exists and the statement I believe God exists. If you're telling me the truth when you say I believe God exists, you're reporting a belief that you have, but you're not making a statement about a feature of objective reality in the same way that you are when you say the statement God exists, okay? Now, the advice I'm going to give you throughout this thought primer is this. When you are defending your premises or you're trying to explain why your statements are true statements, you want to think of yourself like a lawyer. Okay? You want to think about yourself as going in and you're going to advocate for the statements that you're making as vigorously as a lawyer would advocate for or against a particular person in a court of law. A lawyer is not just going to walk in the room and say, my client is innocent. Just take my word for it. And we're not going to do that when we're explaining why we believe our statements is true. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to do what lawyers do. We're going to bring in evidence and we're going to explain the significance of that evidence. And we're going to offer reasons to believe that that evidence demonstrates that the statement that we're making is an actually true statement. So we want to defend our statements that we make as vigorously as we possibly can so that the person who's considering these statements believes that we have good reason for believing these statements that comprise our arguments are actually true.